We have a very full day or hour that we're going to do today, and have some special guests at the very end that I'm excited to introduce you to on the Pilates Hour. Today, we're going to be talking about an interactive case that you're going to be helping me out with. So we are going to be using Mentimeter again. So you want to get your cell phones out and sort of solving this live case that I have, and a patient of mine from not too long ago. And we'll get started. Now, before we do that, I want to do a little review of Parkinson's disease so that everybody's on the same page. So when we talk about what our objectives are going to be, we can do that. So let's get started. Let's do a quick review of Parkinson's disease and what it actually means. If I can get my first slide. And this is a very interesting population. And a lot of people are concerned, and they have family members. It's one of the most common neurological diagnoses that we come across in physical therapy and in neurology. The idiopathic scoliosis that we're talking about today is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States. So approximately 1.5 million diagnosed, and that was as of 93. We see that number actually increasing. And the increasing could be partly because we have better testing and elimination process of other diseases. And we also see more testing, and we're also living longer. So there's a lot of factors that might be involved of why we would see that number go up. What we typically think is that it has a genetic component to it that gets triggered by either a stress or an environmental stressor or a toxin or a disease. You know, maybe you get a flu, or you get something like, it could be any of those things, but something triggers the response for Parkinson's disease. I know there's a affiliation with certain drugs as well, and aluminum, things like that, that have been associated with it in the past. So let's go to the next. And basically what we're looking at here in this slide here, it's a dopamine deprivation. So the substantia nigra is an organ inside the brain that produces the neurotransmitter dopamine. And dopamine needs to be received for many things. First of all, dopamine is a pleasure center. It's a pleasure neurotransmitter. So if you're lacking dopamine, you'll also find accompanied psychological impairment sometimes, like depression or frustration or flatness and lack of excitement, because that often is the response of dopamine. Dopamine also is very responsible for the fluidity of movement. So if we are lacking dopamine, there is a loss of continuity and fluidity of movement. And so we'll look at some of those signs and symptoms that we see with it. So let's go to the next slide. So when we look at a clinical manifestation of Parkinson's disease, there's some very classical signs. And again, not all of them are classical Parkinson's disease. There's Parkinsonism. So there's types of diseases that can manifest with some of these same signs and symptoms. One of the most common ones is bradykinesia. And bradykinesia is a slowness of movement. Brady means slow, kinesia means movement. And you just see this slow struggle to move. Rigidity is part of that as well. We'll talk a little bit about why this happens in the nervous system. But the body becomes rigid. And this is very different than what you might think of with spasticity and other neurological impairments. So if you think of a spinal cord injury or multiple sclerosis, can result in a spasticity where a muscle is not inhibited, and you tend to see a pattern of spasticity. So you see an arm pulled up and be spastic in this flexion pattern, or a leg that's spastic in extension. Parkinson's is very different. It is actually a rigidity. It's a stiffness of all of the muscles. There's a lack of inhibition. There's a lack of fluidity. So all the muscles become stiff. So movement becomes very difficult to initiate, like getting out of a chair, taking a step. And when the disease progresses, we have what we call freezes. So freezes is where the system just stops. The communication does not move. And you might have to do little tricks, if not medication, of using things like laser lights. Like a lot of times I'll use a laser light and I'll change the pattern directive, and I'll say, can you step over the laser light? And they can unfreeze and start moving again. So things that are more repetitive and rhythmic movements get affected the most by rigidity and by bradykinesia. The tremors is a classic sign. We call it a pill rolling sign, and that's when the hand has a little bit of a shake to it in a resting tremor. And it looks like what the pharmacist would do, how they would roll the pills to put them into the bottles for prescriptions. And so they call it a pill rolling sign or pill rolling at rest. Gait disturbances, we see what we call festinating gait. And there's basically two ends of this that we see in gait patterns. One, it's difficult to initiate, and two, it's difficult to stop. So if the feet start moving fast and they're dragging on the floor, it's very hard for them to decelerate, hence the risk of falls. Now, in and of itself, Parkinson's disease does not necessarily shorten your lifespan. So a lot of people will know that they have a full life, even though they have Parkinson's disease. But what's interesting is the quality of life that they have, and how our goal is like, how do we help them? A lot of times the major problems with the Parkinson's disease is falls. Falls is without a doubt the leading cause of injuries and hospital visits because of this disease. So our goal as practitioners is we need to do everything possible to try to influence the gait and the movement in a way that becomes more safe. It also has to do with safety practice, things like not having rugs on the floor and teaching them to be careful of where there's stairs or ramps, that they would have assistance, or they would have a walking device to be able to avoid the difficulty again of initiating or stopping or slowing down. They also have a very common postural instability. So we'll see this kyphotic position, shortened hip flexors, shortened knee extensors, and shortened ankle dorsiflexion, and you'll see that pattern sort of collapsing you see in this hand drawing here. Loss of postural reflexes. So for example, when you lose your balance and you reach your foot out really quick to catch yourself, very difficult to write. So we practice writing, is what it's called. We practice that where we create obstacles in a very safe environment, and we perturb the need for the reflex, and we try to exaggerate that reflex. There also are non-motor symptoms that we see with this, and non-motor symptoms could consist of depression, decreased speech, decreased socialization. And these to me often are much more concerning to me. One of the biggest complaints I have with many of my clients that have Parkinson's is that they feel embarrassed to be social. And this is a really challenging thing to overcome. In the beginning with Parkinson's, the medication, the synthetic, my brain just went off somewhere, dopamine, right? So L-dopas and those kind of medications actually give a nice honeymoon where most people could not tell that the individual has Parkinson's disease. But like diabetes and like Alzheimer's, what happens is as we continue to put synthetic pharmaceutical substitutes in, the natural production in the substantia nigra, the pancreas, and other parts of the organs of the body actually decrease, which means you would need more L-dopa and more insulin to be able to have a normal quality of life. Well, the problem is that every drug has a side effect. And one of the side effects of too much L-dopa or synthetic dopamine is ataxia, where you have involuntary movement and writhing, which sometimes can have the appearance of being intoxicated. So a number of my patients that have had that, where they've had Parkinson's disease for 10, 20 years, have also had the accompanying side effects of being on these drugs for a long time. And they were much more embarrassed about the side effect of the drug than they were even of the initial limitations of the disease. So when I think of what is my big objective here, and this is what I want to start off with, so when we go into the real case, it can help you out. But the big objective here is, if I know from the research that if I can increase their movement and increase their participation, increase their socialization and their acceptance of themselves as they are, and that they can have successful movement experiences, that the release of dopamine actually is greater. So the progression of the decline of the substantia nigra producing dopamine actually slows down. And we have a number of cases that we've seen over a 10-year period. I'll show you a video clip if you haven't seen it already on the Polestar YouTube. But we have a video clip of clients who have been with us for 5 to 10 years doing Pilates twice a week as a preventative and exercise methodology. And they commented that they needed to take less medication, which is the key to prolonging the quality of life, even though Parkinson's disease in itself does not shorten the length of life, right? So this is really important to understand. So we want to have as much stimulus to create and activate that substantia nigra as possible through movement, activities, singing, art, and socialization, so that they can have the best quality of life possible and function at a much higher level. And that higher level is also going to prevent falls. So that's really what we're looking at. Let's go to the next slide. And again, if you have questions at any time, feel free to put them down there. So therapeutic interventions, we typically look at this idea of how important it is for them to have physical training and resistance training. And there are a number of studies out there for the last 20, 30 years that show that exercise is one of the best things for managing this degenerative neurological disease. It slows down the process. It increases the quality of their life. The problem is motivation. So if you were to ask a client that has Parkinson's disease, why aren't you exercising? They often don't know, but it's usually a lack of motivation, right? So if you're feeling a little depressed or discouraged, it is harder to have motivation, right? And I think that's a very common thing that we see quite often. So I have a comment or a question here from somebody we'll read right now. It says, my running buddy who runs 5 to 10 miles per week has Parkinson's for 5 diagnosed years. She does everything imaginable: strength, Pilates, energy work, spin, yoga, PT. She works with a geriatric board PT. And my role is friend, not clinician. She is considering a brain stimulation implant. Any insight or experience on training post-implant? So to answer that question, I wasn't going to talk about implants today, but it's a great point. And the implant actually stimulates the substantia nigra to release your own dopamine. So I am in favor of that if they qualify for it, because it minimizes the progression of the medication. If the medication progresses too quickly, then the other side effects that affect quality of life become more challenging. And that's what we're really trying to do, is early on. And if he or she is active and doing all that activity, that's the best thing. And if it starts progressing still, and it makes sense to the physicians and the surgeons to do a stimulator, I've had many patients that are able to do everything with the brain stimulator inside, really no limitations, and the doctors will give you the prescription of anything that they might have to limit for the beginning time. And then they just regulate that. And what they can do is, as the degeneration progresses, they can also modify the stimulation of the substantia nigra. So it's a pretty cool invention. All right, Robin asked, are symptoms worse if you get it earlier in life? And remember, it's a degenerative disease, Robin. So what happens is, typically what we're trying to do is to prevent the progression of it by doing large movements and early intervention and keeping them active, and lots of talking, singing, wide mouth, boxing across the room, and dancing and artwork and social. Those are all things that we know improve and slow down the progression of the disease. All right, let's take a look at these interventions. I think I had one more thing here. Pilates, now we know, offers an alternative treatment approach as well. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, of course. It's the Pilates Hour, which focuses on expanded spectrum of movement. So the idea is that no matter what stage, and I didn't cover this, it was on the previous slide, but the Yarn-Horn scale is what measures the severity of the disease and its progression. And the beautiful thing about Pilates in that range of 1 to 4 is that we can service very comfortably everybody from 1 to 4, stage 4, in the Yarn-Horn scale for Parkinson's disease. And that's a really cool thing. That means that we can work with somebody their whole life and providing them with great movement stimulation, even in the most advanced stages of Parkinson's disease. We can create the optimal assistive environment, closed chain, postural orientation, awareness training that anybody could ever hope for. So it's a great environment for us. And movement experience is facilitated by gauging exercises to match the patient's ability. So we do have to be careful, not so much in Pilates, but in conditioning with neurological impairments of overheating. Maybe you've heard of that before, like patients that have multiple sclerosis. We want to avoid overheating, meaning that you wouldn't want to push them really hard on a spin bike until they are exhausted, because then they're going to be down for a week or two. And again, that level of stress could trigger another episode. We also know that's true with almost all of the, like even if it's a stroke or there's certain medications that they take, that overheating is not a good idea. It's not the end of the world. You might overheat once and go, wow, I took them too far. I don't want to take them that far again. So what is the yellow light that says, hey, you're getting close to overheating, stop. And they have to learn that. From Pilates, we don't get there. We don't really push that button. You'll find that people that have multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease can do a whole hour of a well-designed program in Pilates that they can't do with any other exercise form. So I want you to see a little video clip that I had Melissa put together from an experiment that we did. We had a class for almost 10 years where Jared Lubers and Wendy and Elizabeth all were part of working with these clients of ours. So go ahead and let's show it and listen up and listen to what they have to say.
I feel more positive, more active. I feel wonderful.
My overall endurance and fitness, and I feel better, after the exercise helps me feel better.
I think it's better than all the medicine that I'm taking. I've had several other exercises, and none of them has ever affected me as good as this one. And the exercise seems to eliminate a lot of that tremor I had. And if you notice, I don't have any trembling of the arm or so forth, and I believe that's the exercises portion of, giving me credit for whatever I do.
I recommend it. I always recommended Pilates for Parkinson's, for every illness. The people are all, I recommend it for arthritis, because I have arthritis too. But arthritis is wonderful. I have more activities, more fast. My mind more open.
I believe that the best thing for people with Parkinson is Pilates, because that tells you to control yourself. You control your muscle more, and controlling your muscle more, it will help you a lot. I have a lot of experience in helping people with Parkinson, because I've been doing exercises. They first told me that I've been doing exercise for 20 years every day.
All right, thank you, Melissa. I'd love to see any comments or things or emotions that you feel when you see that video. If you are familiar with any clients or family members that have suffered with Parkinson's disease, and to hear them being able to say after years of doing Pilates that my mind is more open, that it's better than the medication that I've taken, and to see them doing this type of movement is a very powerful experience for us as Pilates teachers. And I want you to understand that this group was just doing Pilates. This was not physical therapy. This was a group that came in for $10 a session twice a week to be able to do Pilates. We got it subsidized so that they could have Pilates twice a week over all those years. And those were some of the really cool things that we saw. Let's bring the slides back up and let's get moving into the case study here. I hope you like that. I think it was, it's really exciting to see that. And if you want to see the whole video, you just go into the YouTube channel for Polestar Pilates and look up Parkinson's disease and you'll see the whole video. It's a 10-minute video. So here's our client. We have a client, we're going to use is Arthur, 83-year-old male. He is a retired veteran. He enjoyed hiking, biking, hunting, and travel. He recently was hospitalized for a respiratory issue. He had also had a fall that he had a hairline fracture in his hip that put him in the hospital for a couple of days that I think led to the respiratory issue. You certainly don't want to have to go in the hospital right now as an 83-year-old. And he complained of difficulty getting out of bed, transferring in and out of the car. And he also complained of arthritic pain in his knees, feet, and shoulders, particularly his right knee. So this is sort of our little case here that we're looking at. And I think that when we look at overall, what I want you to think of is, here is a whole person, a person that has lived a very accomplished life, has really enjoyed the outdoors. And right now he's in a stage, probably stage 3 is where I would classify him on the Hoehn-Yahr scale. And it's getting difficult now for his daily function, his daily life activities. So getting out of bed, initiating standing up, some dressing difficulties, transferring in and out of the car to go places with his wife, all of these are becoming very challenging. Let's go to the next slide. So let's give you some insight from some of the subjective comments we know from him. So it's my question. You guys know my question. I asked Arthur, what do you believe you are not able to do that you believe you should be able to do? And actually, I usually ask that the other way around. What do you believe you should be able to do that you believe you're not able to do? And his answer to me was, go for a walk without everyone staring at me, which sort of triggered a red flag for me, right? I was thinking, this is something that that we need to overcome, the stigma of Parkinson's disease and going into the community, or worrying that people are looking at him. And he is starting to have some ataxia. I don't know if you noticed it, but Victor in the video, he had a little bit of writhing. It wasn't a normal movement of Parkinson's disease. That's a result of medication for 30 years. So that movement is a little bit of what Arthur is starting to have when he's on his medication and not frozen. He has this involuntary movement of his body. He's very conscious of this, thinking that everybody's looking at him like he's drunk. The other concern he had was being able to maintain his integrity and independence with his daily dressing, toileting, and getting around the house. Those were some difficult things for him now. And he was very dependent on his wife. And that was very challenging for him because he had always been so independent and very much taking care of others. So when I asked him, what do you believe prevents you from participating in these activities, right? My second question, he answered, my new medications cause me to move like I am drunk, and I don't want my community to see me this way. My rigidity and arthritis make it difficult to keep my balance and to initiate movement. So right away, we're painting a picture. This is his perception of what's going on. This is what he's answering to me. So take a quick look at it, because we're going to go to Mentimeter right now. But just take a look at this again. His primary belief is that he wants to be able to walk and not be an obstacle for everybody to look at. And just right off the bat, I don't know that we can stop him from having, a gait that's observable, or the pill rolling in his hands, or the ataxia when he's on his meds. So it might be more about getting him to accept where he is so he can still go out and move in the community, even if he has gait issues, and not to be worried about it or to be embarrassed about it, to take pride in the fact that he's 83 and he's staying on top of it, and he's going to win this game and stay active as long as he can. And then the second thing is talking about his physical and functional limitations that he perceives with his daily activities at home, very basic daily activities. We call those activities of daily living, which are things like feeding, toileting, showering, dressing, and locomotion. So he's limited in those right now, or has the perception of. And then his belief of what's causing his problem is the movement he's embarrassed about is the new increase in the dosage of his medication. And also that his arthritis, as well as the Parkinson's disease, is making it really hard for him to keep his balance and to move. All right, we're going to go to Mentimeter. Get your phones ready. And it's menti.com on your phone. And then when you're ready, you punch in the numbers 21, 48, 13, 8. While you are getting into your Menti phone, I'm going to answer a question here. I see a comment from anonymous attendee. My mom passed away from what they told us was Parkinson's, and a special type of Alzheimer's disease that the doctor said only Parkinson's patients get. Any thoughts on that? This is not uncommon to have a pairing of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. There is something very interesting about how the disease progresses. And there is, when we go into the memory centers, right, where you would see Alzheimer's and dementia centers, you also will see a certain number of them that also have accompanying Parkinson's disease. Remember how I talked about diabetes? Same kind of progressive thing where the neurotransmitters are not being produced. It could be a gut issue that we've talked about before in nutrition, that the gut is not synthesizing the right neuropeptides for the production of these neurotransmitters, right? So those are some things to look at. And, again, to me, even in treating Alzheimer's disease, is that movement is king. It's difficult because they don't have great body awareness and they don't remember from session to session, but the movement is essential. And there are times where they have lucidness and they're able to communicate and do things that they didn't think they could do when you let them be sedentary or give up on them. There's also, what is the youngest onset of this disease? My son has had tremors in his hands since he was 16. There is what's called an intentional tremor. And that's when you actually go to do something, there's a tremor, and that's quite common and doesn't necessarily have a major pathology tied to it or a neurological pathology. I've seen that in many of my young and older patients. Parkinson's disease has more of what's called a resting tremor. And we'll come back and answer some more of those questions. Let's go to the next slide and let's see what you guys have to say about it. So before we go into the physical assessment and based on our subjective information so far, what would you hypothesize author needs from us first and foremost? So take a couple minutes and just start writing. It's going to pop up on the screen. Look forward to seeing what you have to say. While you're doing that, I see some other comments that have come up, and question on ataxia. Ataxia is uncontrolled movement, and you might see it as something like writhing, where you start seeing the body moving and swaying. So when we saw Victor in the video, you could see that he actually was having some ataxic movement. And if you thought of somebody like being drunk and walking down the street and just sort of stumbling, that too could be interpreted as ataxic movement, okay? And everybody, is totally okay not to be sure on this, because I get lots of communication people that just don't know what to do with their clients that have some of these neurological impairments. So we're seeing lots of great things coming up: build self-confidence, balance, coordination, rhythm, encouragement. And I like the mixture of the behavioral with the physical. I think you can't separate them in Parkinson's disease, and we have to be very conscientious of both. So I'm really digging what I'm seeing there. But a lot of it is about balance and gait and postural work and working on, how do we build that confidence back up in Arthur in his daily activities. This is a great collection. Very good. Anybody else want to add anything to it? I see motivation, imagery. We know that you can do some really cool stuff with doing some imagery of being able to move fluidly, that can also stimulate dopamine, right? And the thing is, dopamine is a very short-lived neurotransmitter. So it needs to keep being stimulated throughout the day. So it's not enough just to do one Pilates class and be done with it. All right, very good. Let's go to the next slide. Excellent job, everybody. I hope you enjoy this. I think it's nice to see what your thoughts are and to have your interaction on this. So what activities will Arthur need to be able to perform successfully and participate in his daily activities? So based on what he wants to do, I want you to click in here and see what you say. I gave you some options on this one, I think. Let me see if there's any questions that I missed from you all. Yeah, got all of it. Glad to know. Good. Ooh, look at that. Bed mobility just took a jump. Ooh, look at that. Wow. Oh, initiate walking. See, this is the good stuff. You guys get to see a little bit of what's out there and see what you think. All good stuff. Let's get some more people to participate. Let's see what the general audience thinks about this one. Well, I'll tell you what, you all are right, but I do agree that I think sit to stand is probably going to be where I want to start, or bed mobility. So awesome job. Let's move on. Let's see what the next information helps us out with. So insight number 3, Arthur presents with all types of Parkinson's disease, including typical signs of Parkinson's disease, including pronounced kyphotic posture, forward head. He has slow festinating gait. Like I said, I think he's probably, I'd rate him around a 3 in the Parkinson scale. He presents with a resting tremor in his hands. He also walks with a limp, favoring his right knee due to the arthritis, right? So the pain also is interfering with his Parkinson's disease. So a lot of times if they've had accidents, and thank goodness his hip doesn't bother him very much, but he did have some respiratory problems, and that fracture last year that took him to the hospital that gave him the respiratory problems. And then the arthritis in his right knee is probably the most debilitating. So let's go to the next slide. So based on this information, next slide. What would be our first assessment choice? I've given you some options, so let's play with it and tell me. These are assessments from the Polestar assessment tool that we use, and the names are pretty self-explanatory, but tell me which of these you would consider to be your first choice of assessment that would give us the most information about where Arthur is in his condition. Oh, you guys are good. Let's go. Come on, guys, participate. I want to see bigger numbers. We're at 36. Let's see if we can get up to like 50, 60 people. It's great to get your information in there. And if you can't get Mentimeter to work for you, you can also write it into your chat if you're having a hard time technologically, like I do sometimes. That's why I have Melissa, because Melissa helps me with those things. All right, that looks great. 40 in, we think sit to stand being number 1. The walking assessment number 2, and then half squat and goalpost are sort of the same lower level. So let's go to the next slide and see what we found. So dynamic alignment results. So we're looking at sit to stand, and he was unable to perform without a max assist. You notice I put sit to stand as my first test for him. With that max assist of the teacher. So whoever was with him or his partner needed to help him with all of their might to get out of that chair. Now, that was not because he didn't have the strength. It was because he could not get his weight forward on his chair to be able to initiate standing up. And so a lot of times what you'll see is they get stuck back in the chair and they can't initiate the forward momentum. So we have a lot of interventions to try to get the weight to shift back over the feet and to use the body in its appropriate way to come up, right? So definitely a problem there. Upon further assessment, he expressed fear of falling due to a previous fall, and one that ended up with a mild hip fracture on the right and 1 week in the hospital. That was when he had his respiratory infection. We looked at goalpost, and we weren't able to stand him all the way erect. It wasn't giving us a whole lot of information. Nothing was going to correct in that moment regarding his posture. Didn't turn out to be quite as relevant as the others. And then the walking assessment became very important to me. And that's where I saw the festinating gait. That's where the gait goes a little bit faster and faster, and that's the risk of falls. So I was really concerned about Arthur's risk of falls, and being that he already had falls, and that he also was scared of falling because he had been in the hospital before. Difficulty initiating steps. So he already was at that stage where, he could get frozen, right? And he had difficulty navigating any kind of stairs and any kind of obstacles. So if he had to like turn around or go through the hallway or change directions, that was very challenging for Arthur at that time. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So where can we hypothesize that Arthur is missing coordination and balance? You have the answers there. Let's see what you say when you click on it and see if we're all on the same page. Somebody asked, is sit to stand a new Polestar fitness screening? It is evolved from the fitness screening into what we call the Polestar assessment tool. And about 15 years ago, the screening went through an evolution into what we call the FMOM, that Sherry Betts had a lot to do with. And then we've continued to evolve that. And that did have a sit to stand in it. And then we've evolved it even more in what we call the Polestar assessment tool. So if you ever want to get into that, that's certainly something that's available to you. And I think we're all on the same page that all of these were applicable, right? So all of the above, I felt was the right answer. They all have the same thing to do. He's having a very difficult time between his fear and the actual restrictions that he has with his pathology and the rigidity and the stiffness that are concerned. So let's go to the next slide. So let's set some goals and objectives, and let's see what we got here. So which limitations will become our primary objective? And let's see what we come up with. This is up to you. You're going to write in or choose what you think is going to be our best objective that we could measure for Arthur. And thinking, remember, this objective has to tie into what he wants to be able to do, what he believes he should be able to do that he's not able to do. So if you think back of what he was complaining about, he had difficulties with some of his most basic ADLs, getting out of bed, bed mobility, sit to stand, toileting, getting dressed. So where might we get our biggest bang for the buck with Arthur in the effect, the outcome that we saw with the sit to stand, right? So we saw him not necessarily limited in strength. He does have some knee pain, but his real limitation was fear of falling. So we got to create a way for him to successfully stand up. So all of these are good answers, and we have to get to all of these. And these are going to be part of our intervention with Arthur. But I think that the most, and the one that's going to give him the biggest bang for the buck is getting him to be independent and confident with his sit to stand. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you for your participation. So what modifications will you possibly need to make or to create a positive movement experience for Arthur if sit to stand is going to be our primary goal? What are you going to do? What kind of exercises? And you can list Pilates exercises, apparatus, home exercises, sitting in chair exercises. Like what kind of things do you think are going to be some of our tools in our Pilates environment to be able to make sure that Arthur has a safe and a successful experience? See, I have another question here or comment. It says, would the half squat be a good indicator of initiation of a sit to stand and balance, especially if he's unable to do sit to stand? So I personally would not do the half squat because until I knew that he could do a sit to stand. So the sit to stand is going to be safer than you having to hold a belt while he's doing a half squat and potentially fall, right? So we would like to use the chair as one of our most basic things. And I think, Diane, I did answer the ataxia, what ataxia means. So I think we're done with that. And I think we answered that one. So good. There's a question about, have we published this work with Parkinson's disease? We have presented it as an abstract in multiple forums, including the Physical Therapy Association, and we did in conjunction with some students from University of Miami. We did not write a paper that got submitted into a journal. So the answer to that is no. Okay, let's see what you guys put. What modifications? So basically all of the above. And that's the best answer, right? definitely using the environment to modify gravity is our greatest advantage, no doubt. I will tell you that the most important safety thing you can do is make sure that you either have a safety belt or that you have contact guard with them, especially when they're moving from machine to machine. Let me give you a little experience on that. I can tell you that multiple times I have seen the patients with Parkinson's disease get a little overzealous, and they start feeling good and comfortable in the environment, and they try to move too fast, and they try to move from one piece to the other piece, and they don't really take the safety precautions that they need to. And I've seen them almost fall down. And so what I always tell the practitioner is, do not ever make the assumption in your space that that is okay, especially with stage 2, 3, and 4 Parkinson's disease, where it's 4 is probably not going to be able to do it by themselves, but 2 and 3 create the most danger because when they feel good, they want to move. And sometimes they move too fast and too carelessly, and that can lead to, potential injury. So I always like to have a gait belt. And you know what I use as a gait belt in my clinic is the belt that goes around the trapeze table that Balanced Body puts on every trapeze table. You can use that as a gait belt. You can have an oversized belt from the belt department at Macy's, or a used belt that you use, just a nice thicker one, the better, that you can really cinch down and hold them to help them. And one of the things we teach all the time is when they start to go down is to pull their weight into close to your waist. And that is the best way to let them down onto the ground if they're going to fall, so they don't fall forward or back or in a position that hurts anybody, and especially not to hurt you. So using a safety belt is really important. One of the things that the research is really just shining a light on right now is exaggerated commands and movement and cueing for patients with Parkinson's disease. And so, you want things like wide opening of the mouth when they talk and reaching big. And you'll even ask them, take a big step, and they take a step and it's like this big. So now you have to exaggerate that step. You have to exaggerate that move, exaggerate the circles in the feet and straps, exaggerate the stepping on the chair, single leg press, and exaggerate the wall squats. You'd be surprised that they can do so much. I mean, we had them doing feet and straps on the reformer. We had them doing feet and straps on the trapeze table, a modified parakeet, spine stretch, swan, push through, bridging with leg press. They were able to do a lot of these exercises successfully and really feel accomplished being able to do a full hour of Pilates with friends. And I do suggest that if you can do a circuit class when we get past the COVID, that's a great way to do it. So exaggeration, we use modification all the time of gravity. So that's where we eliminate gravity with the springs that we use on the trapeze table, or laying on their back to work on their squatting activity. So now let's think of this idea of sit to stand. And we know the tools we have inside our environment. Let's go to the next slide, Melissa. How do we now design a program, knowing the modifications, knowing what our goals and objectives are, and using the Pilates environment? I've given you a chance to think about some of the exercises you're going to post up there. But what are some of the exercises that you're going to incorporate into his beginning session in Pilates? And I want you to use all the information we gave you. So the assessment, the objectives, the modifications, his goals, just start putting up some number of extra. And I want you to realize how powerful you are in somebody's life that has Parkinson's disease. You do not have to be a physical therapist or a neurologist to be able to create a safe exercise program that brings incredible enhancement to the quality of life of our friends that are suffering from Parkinson's disease. And I see some great things there. Yeah. I mean, footwork is just such a great exercise to get rhythm and to break up some of the rigidity. And after they do footwork, a lot of times that might be all you have to do some days, or standing single leg press, right? Those are all very powerful exercises. Bridging, getting that extension, swan, because that thoracic posture, trying to get them. I love the barrel, the ladder barrel, laying them prone over the barrel, not in extension, and their feet on the ground, and just have them lift their body up to where they can. Even though they're in negative space, even if they can lift up a little bit to get that extension, goes a really long way. Things that they can do at home. Somebody put pelvic clocks and marching and those kind of things. Excellent exercises for them to do at home. Wall squats or standing against the wall, marching. I love to use a real chair. Sherry Betts does some great work with her geriatric population, using a real chair in group class to make sure that they're safe and they can do like a standing and sitting Pilates class. That's fantastic. And these are the same kind of tools that we can use with our clients. It's great. I see it 31, 32, 33. People have been putting things in here, some new ideas. I see the ooh popped up. That's good to see. You guys got the right idea. So again, what a great set of tools that we could do. Now, how are we going to know if we're actually helping Arthur with his sit to stand? And this is, I want you to write this inside the Q&A. But how would we know if we're actually helping him? What would we have to test again and again every time? Let's see where somebody might put those. While you're answering that question, you could do it either in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm looking at both of them. Hello, Karen. Good to hear from you. So do you think the trap table is better to use in the reformer because it challenges the eccentric phase of movement more effectively than the reformer? I think they're different, right? They have a different feel to them. And I love both of them. And I also love the chair in single leg stance with their hands up on the handles. All of those facilitate disassociation. And all of those facilitate allowing movement to take place that's needed for sit to stand, stairs, and walking. The question is how does the load vary between them? And that's what your point is, Karen, is that and the trapeze table and the tower bar sprung from above has more control of the eccentric load into the hips and the low back, where when you look at the reformer has a little bit more resistance in pushing out. They both obviously have eccentric, concentric, but you can have, there's a different feel to them, and they're both really valid in a session, right? And you could even do like a standing scooter with their hands on the foot bar and pushing back, again, disassociating, opening up the front of the hip. There's some great work out there for us. And I'm looking at what you have here. Standing strength. The main thing I'm looking for is to retest them in their walking and their sitting and do the sit to stand. That's right. You're going to have to teach the strategy and have them do it over and over and over again every session so that the confidence increases where they no longer are not moving because of fear. And movement in and of itself will make it so that they get stronger and more efficient and more effective. So they can definitely get stronger even though they have Parkinson's disease. They can condition and train. It might not, it doesn't stop the progression of the disease, but it certainly is known to slow it down. And that's what we're looking for. The slower the disease progresses, the healthier and more active they can stay in their daily activities. I see here Susan. Good to see you, Susan, again. We got to spend some time together last week in North Carolina. The emotional reactions to the movement. I think you saw the energy of the people on the video. And of course, they had been with us for many years, some 5-10 years. And what they believed was changing in their life, and how I think a lot of it was socialization. And you watch the video, they would come in with kazoos and have happy birthday parties and all kinds of fun things like that. And just a great time. So you guys are right on the money. What I'd like to know from you right now, and how many of you feel like you would be comfortable working with a client that has Parkinson's disease and being able to provide a decent exercise program for them, not a medically necessitated program, but someone with Parkinson's disease has every right in the world to exercise with a Pilates teacher. How many of you feel comfortable that you could provide a decent exercise program, sort of using this framework of problem solving and saying, yes, we want to work on sit to stand or bed mobility. And you just did it. You designed a beautiful program with lots of exercises with good intention and good meaning. And they're not all going to work, and they're not always going to have good days. But the idea is to consistently give them something that they can that they can hang their hat on. So I'd love to hear from you and just any comments of how you feel about that. And, if you feel like you could actually be empowered, if you don't already, to work with somebody that has Parkinson's disease, maybe a level 2, level 3, and feel like, oh, I can give them a good program. Yeah, I'm seeing some good answers here. Karen Teolis made another good comment that I wanted to bring up, and that's music. Rhythm, music, beats, live congos. We've done some live congo things with them. Dance classes, and you can even have them doing dance classes where they hang onto the trapeze table and they dance with one hand of stability. And so you can have a lot of fun with those kind of things. And we do have some workshops and courses on neurological impairments. Louise Porter asked, I don't have any up right now, but there is a course. Alexander Bolander teaches it. Anna Tashenko is one of the first ones to design that course for us. It specializes in neurorehabilitation, and that there's a class on that. And there are workshops on both multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's, I believe, on the website that are sort of like lectures. Let's see. Yes, yes, yes. Well, okay. So I'm feeling like we're moving in the right direction. Goal today was to help you build confidence and just to know that you're in the right path, that your skill set of teaching Pilates can benefit many different clients. It's really about how we ask the questions and how we interpret that. And that's what we're going to continue to do, probably once a month, if I can muster up enough energy to do a case study a month on the Polestar Pilates Hour. Would be awesome. While I take some questions, Melissa, can you look for Brett Howard and bring him on live? Let's see, Sarah Edwards, absolutely. Katie Lowe, I've never worked with someone with Parkinson's disease, but I think I could, especially at this workshop. So thank you, Katie. That was the goal of the workshop. Asita Costa says, I work with an 87-year-old with knee and hip issues and Parkinson's doing exercise. What we discussed and what would remind me every time that how his balance has improved. And that's really what we're looking for. How do we address quality of life? And by the way, guys, I'm not wearing a tie for you. I was just teaching at the university right before, and I didn't have a chance to change it because, normally I'm in more comfortable clothes. See if I have anything else in here. Thank you guys for your comments. I want to take a minute and just talk to my good friend, Brett Howard. Brett, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That was excellent. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good, good. Brett is a great leader in the Pilates world, and everything from his teaching of classical Pilates and movement to working with children and youth and helping to write the book that the PMA put out. Very independent. I remember one time, by sheer coincidence, Brett and I are down in Argentina in a little town outside of Buenos Aires in a bed and breakfast. And I go to sign in and they go, oh, you already signed in. And I said, no, I haven't signed in. My name is Brent. I said, yeah, Brett. And I said, no, my name's Brent. And I looked down on the sign-in sheet and it's Brett Howard. I go like, is there any way possible that we could both be down in Argentina the same exact day in the same hotel in a bed and breakfast outside of Argentina? That's pretty cool.
Totally forgot about that. That was in San Isidro.
That was in San Isidro.
Yeah.
And then we had a great time in Australia together.
Yep.
That was really fun. So Brett is going to be teaching a workshop for us this Saturday in the Pilates experience, the Polestar experience. And if you haven't taken the opportunity to be involved in that, I would strongly suggest you do so. We always have a graded price scale so that, if you can't afford the normal price, we have a $60 special that we do for the whole day. So Brett is going to be joining us and teaching a workshop, and Murat's going to be teaching a workshop, and then a couple great classes that are going to be there as well. Brett, why don't you just give a little inkling of what you're thinking of presenting on Saturday without giving it away, because we want them to join us.
No problem. I'm teaching a workshop called Applying the Theory of Scaffolding to the Pilates mat exercises. And so my background is in education, and scaffolding is a educational theory that was created by a guy named Jerome Bruner that was influenced by another guy named Lev Vygotsky. And so in the workshop, I'm going to be pretty much breaking down a lot of the exercises in forms of deconstructions and breakdowns, use of props, facilitation of movement, tactile feedback, and progressions. And so if you think about scaffolding, if you're going to restore a building, they put some sort of outside structure up to make sure that the building doesn't fall over. So then that way they can do a lot of work in restoration. And then slowly they start, once the building is becoming more sound, they start to take some of those pieces away until the building can stand by itself without any sort of support. And so that's what I'm doing in relationship to the exercises, finding ways to strengthen some of the skills involved in the exercises, and then slowly starting to put those skills together so then the exercise stands by itself.
Yeah, I love that concept and that image of the scaffolding. And, I often think of that too, like when we get into spiritual discussions, I often say, people might put a bad rap on religions. And I say, look, religion is just a scaffolding around what you're building your spiritual strength. And sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. But what matters is what the building is, right? And so using tools to teach movement, to teach education, to teach reading, to teach critical reasoning, having that scaffolding allows us to make mistakes too. And I think that's important, that, that's a major part of learning. And I really appreciated what you contributed with the children's teaching. And so I'm looking forward that Brett and I have been talking. I hope that I can get him on an hour webinar with us, maybe in January. We get some time. He's very busy, but would love to have you join us for that. And we can talk a little bit more in depth about your work and the things that you're doing.
I would love to do that.
That's great. Melissa looks like she posted on the chat the link for Brett's workshop this weekend. So if you're interested in that, you can look that up, or you can go onto the Polestar website and you can look for the Pilates experience. And I'm thinking if there's anything else I need to let you guys know. I'm sure I'll have something ready for next week, and I think that's going to be the last webinar I do for the holidays. And just want to wish you all a very good weekend. Remember to stay safe, practice safe spacing and mask, and just be patient a little bit longer. Whether you believe in the vaccine or not, I do think it's going to make a difference, medically speaking. So be patient. We're getting close to it. Somebody asked me the other day, and Brett, you could chip in on this if you want to, but they're asking, do you think that we're ever going to be back to normal with our Pilates education? And one of the first things I said is that it's like, they're going to need us more than ever, but our delivery system might be a little different from all the things that we learned through COVID. Did you feel like you learned anything during COVID as it pertains to your teaching Pilates and education?
To me?
Yeah.
Definitely. It's, there's always a learning experience in everything. And, it's not the best thing to have happened, but in a way, I'm kind of grateful for it at the same time. I'd rather not have learned things this way, but, I am grateful for the things that I have learned through this pandemic.
Yeah, I think there's so many lessons we learned, and I agree. It's a horrible thing that happened to the world. I don't think anybody really should be taking blame for it that I know of, but it certainly has allowed us to reflect, to look at things that are most important, to learn how to pivot our businesses, even in times of difficulty where, who thought back in February that you could teach Pilates without being in person, touching, holding their hand, holding their gum, whatever it is that we hold when they come into our studios, and still be able to deliver really meaningful, heartfelt connectivity with our teaching and our clients and our students. So,
the other thing, sorry, I didn't interrupt, it just brought everyone a lot closer too. It's amazing that like some days I'm teaching like in 5 different countries, and I'm like, that's amazing. Before I would never be able to do this, and you feel such a connection with so many other people closer.
Oh, I agree with that. And it's funny because in the past, what would we have to do? You'd have to travel 200 days a year to get to 1/5 of the people that we get to now on a regular basis, and actually have more intimate, contact with them, even through Zoom. So, well, listen, guys, we are out of time. Thank you, Brett, for coming on and making an appearance. Always good to see you, and look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Hopefully you can join us. And remember, if you can't make the actual, whether it's the Pilates Hour or it's the Polestar Experience, they're always recorded. So if you register for them, you can look at them over and over and over again. It gets sent to you. And if you're at a different time zone, that's okay too. You can do that. But I just want to thank everybody. I'll try to get to the questions If we can, Melissa often will pull some questions out that I couldn't get to today, and we'll try to answer them either in the letter that goes out or in the next webinar. So thank you again. We'll have something exciting next week. Hope to see you on next Thursday, the Pilates Hour. Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you again, Brett, and we'll see you guys next week.